What's up everyone? In today's video we're going to be looking at my week 6 game of the Tabletop Simulator Season 10 League. I was 4-1 at that time, and so was Vodkablitz, my opponent for the week. He was also a really good friend of mine, so it was a bit of a heartbreaker to be facing each other for the winning in for the top 32, as you need a score of 5-1 to make it through. So I won priority, thankfully. Against X-Men, like if Vodka plays, I'd rather win prior than play on his secures. So that was the step one if you want to having a good game against him. And then the scenario combination with demons and hammers was really good for me. So at the beginning we take some time to just verify that everyone's seeing the terrain the same way, that everything's good. I have a quick look at his roster. I'm very familiar with X-Men in general because Vodka is one of my regular practice partner, so we play pretty often. It's probably the person I've played the most games with overall since starting Marvel Crisis Protocol. Because he lost prior, he could choose a threat, so he went for 18, which is better for him than 19. At 19 I can fit Medusa with Sentinel Prime, which is a very good combination. At 18 I cannot, so I had to go with this setup instead with Black Bolt, Prime, Miss Marvel, Crystal, and Bullseye. For my team tactic cards, initially I went with both Restricted, Eyes on the Prize for my safe extract play, Flash, and the last one I wasn't sure, but Fallback felt like a good idea. The other one I really would like to get in is Inhuman Royal Family, more likely than not. But overall, this is what I'm looking at. I will end up cutting Sacrifice and going with both Inhuman Royal Family and Fallback. The logic being that Fallback is just a really good defensive card. It's especially good versus Domino, who I'm expecting to see from Vodkablitz. And Inhuman Royal Family will help Black Bolt punch through a little bit more damage so that I can daze and or KO key models at the right time, as this is going to be a slow scoring game and a pretty grindy one. So attrition will be important. Because I have priority, I don't need to bring two models for the Eyes on the Prize play. I don't need to threaten both hammers. I'll be able to just grab one and run away, so I do not need to bring two safe extract plays, which is why I can bring Miss Marvel in instead of Beast, that I have Crystal and Miss Marvel instead of Crystal and Beast. For Vodka, I wasn't certain exactly what I'd see from him, but I think if I had thought about it a bit more, his team makes sense. With Ebonima, he gets a big terrain throw, which is going to be really relevant, as I do not throw that much terrain myself, especially not big pieces. I do have Smash and Sentinel Prime or Miss Marvel to take out one big piece, but I cannot take out more than that easily. And then I do have a size 2 throw, but like for size 3 and 4 I don't have anything. The good news is on that map there isn't any size 4s. There is a lot of size 3s though, so I have to be careful about this. But it is one of the reasons behind where I'm kind of like am deploying Crystal. On that side of the map there are less size 3s near my models that Ebonima could throw easily, right? Like if we look, I'll pause for a second, if we look right where the size 3 are, there's one over here, but this one's like pretty deep on my side. There's one over here, there's one there. This is also size 3, right? But like basically I cannot really run away from the two more like in the center, those two. But if I get my models more on this side of the board, I can avoid this one, right? And this is kind of like what's going through my mind as I choose to go for the hammer on the other side. I'm like, you know what? I'll just be setting up my models more safely on the side with a bit less size trees. That could get thrown into me early on. The other big trees are also size trees, but I don't think those are going to be relevant with how they are placed. So we start with Crystal for the safe extract play, using Eyes on the Prize and a power off of Bullseye, as I do not expect to be doing anything with that power on Bullseye on the first round. Moving back to cover just in case. After all, X-Men can threat really far if they want to on round 1 with the help of their leadership to do what is commonly known as the X-Men up or the X-Men jump. With to me my X-Men, Logan is able to grab the hammer and go back to safety behind the barrels. So what that does is mostly it protects him from getting grabbed by Sentinel Prime and his restraint cables, because otherwise I'd be able to double move, restraint cables him towards me, and then start attacking his extract holder right away. Considering it is demons and you want to you don't really want to send your models on demons if you can avoid it. So because of that, I am more interested into not going in the center if I can avoid it. And Vodka is also not interested, right? At least not for most of the game. At some point, someone's gonna go to generate some extra victory points, but early on, no one is really incentivized to go on it, as it is an extremely dangerous place on the board with a lot of threat projection from both players. I have a lot of damage that I can output to someone that goes in the center, and so does Vodka. No one really wants to go to it. Right now you see I've been looking at where I can go, not get caught by Ebonima if he X-Men jumps off of Storm, and I've chose to advance Miss Marvel a little bit forward, but not too forward, right? So that if someone goes on the center, I am able to punish it next round with Miss Marvel, but I am not exposing myself too much. Vodka is doing a similar thing, setting up more X-Men jump options just to increase the pressure. The only thing that's important for me to note in that case is he still has to pick up the hammer, so even if he is projecting 2 X-Men jumps, only one of them is going to really happen, and the other one will not ever be a threat because a model will need to pick up the hammer, and once you have an objective, you cannot use the X-Men jump. We're correcting a little mishap. So here you'll see with Black Bolt, I want to grab the hammer with Black Bolt because I'd rather have Sentinel Prime not have one, because he still scales extremely well without it, especially that I have Smash, and I kind of want to set up a Smash round at this point for round 2, because I will have priority round 2, so if I can do a position where Sentinel Prime is ready to beat up someone with Smash on round 2, I'm happy with that. I also would like to keep my restraint cable options open as much as possible, and here you will see I'm going to grab the hammer with Black Bolt and then reposition a little bit more forward, so that same concept, right? I still want to be able to threaten the center and or some potentially dangerous plays next round, but the main thing I want to avoid is getting it twice off of a X-Men jump. So here I look at my distance, and I also put a short tool off of his models just to see. The reason why I put out a short is because basically the X-Men jump is much smaller than a short. Is because like a short is like 3 point something inches, I want to say, while the X-Men jump gives you 2 inches with a small base of, because you place within 1, which is 1 inch, and then the base is like around 1 inch too for a small base. It's like roughly 2 inches. So I know that if I'm at range 4 plus a short from a model, I will not get caught by a small base doing a X-Men jump. And range 4 is the max range at which Ebonima and Domino can attack. So here, just a move action, Ebonima cannot get in range. So Vodka will use the X-Men jump, but as you can see, I am outside of the range because of how I position. By pre-measuring, I did take the time to pre-measure here, which I don't always do, but you always should when you can kind of like pre-measure stuff, or at least make sure you're in a position where you're going to be safe. So here the long movement tool is being used by Vodka to figure out where you can go to then throw a piece of terrain into, which is going to hurt because I cannot brace, but I do have 4 dices, and my train of thought is if I take some damage from the throw, I ideally take like 2, and then I can boost my defense dice on the attack, because I assume Vodka will throw before attacking with Eponema, because if he attacks first and deals damage, I can then potentially brace, and I think he'd rather force as much damage as possible. So rolling my dices for the block, I block 2, take 2. This is perfect. I can now boost my defense against his attack, and if I really need to, I can even use some rerolls off of Sentinel Prime, so I'm fairly optimistic that I will not take too much damage. I get really lucky and block 4. So here, but Vodka got his wild at least, so he can move me with the trigger on Ebonima's Gainer, which gives an advance on a wild. Moves me backwards, which is annoying because now next round I will not be as efficient with Black Bolt offensively. I'm in range to attack Ebonima already, which is cool. It's a nice little bonus. I will restrain cable him first because that way I can get him within 2 to remove the cover from Storm's leadership. Rolling 6 dice to my 5, so I don't really expect to deal damage, but if I can deal a little bit, it's a nice bonus. As next round, I'm really, like, basically Ebonima is the model that's kind of like scares me the most from Vodka, at least for the early game, because he hits like a truck, he's got shush to make my life even more miserable, and he throws terrain, and he's got a good displacement tool, and he's really good at attacking Black Bolt and Bullseye. I have 2 models that are pretty weak to Mystic, and his wild trigger that moves people is really annoying because I don't have that many models that are good at like moving back into position when they get hit by that. The good news for me is because he went with Ma before going with Domino to grab the hammer, it let me position Ma aggressively so that I could restrain cable him after with Sentinel Prime, right, instead of just having to take all of that damage on Black Bolt at the last activation and having a less interesting activation with Prime overall. This way I do get a nice Prime positioning. The advantage for Vodka this way is that it does set up the counter attack with Domino into Prime, right? You position roughly at max 3 from Sentinel Prime, so this way he can really mess me up with his rapid fire pistol shots. They are physical, which is my weakest defense on Sentinel Prime, and with his probability manipulation superpower, it's really nasty. And so we're going with the big turn from Prime. He spent 2 power for smash, destroy the size 2 terrain, sorry. Combine that with 3 more power into the attack from the leadership, transferring 1 and like my power up and everything. So it is like 10 dice attack versus 6 defense dice though. I sadly roll only 3, Vodka blocks it. So we follow up with a 7 dice attack, which rolls 0. So this is pretty brutal. I've spent 5 power, a tactic card to roll 17 dices. I was hoping to roll more than 17, like if the first attack deals damage. Sadly it didn't, so we go from like having a really dangerous activation and potentially dazing Ebonima to dealing 0 damage. So the only good news that I have is that Vodka, by placing at max 3 from Prime, put himself outside of 2 from Ma, which he didn't take the time to check before positioning, so he cannot X-Men jump to safety. Black Bolt manages to block 1. This at least is like, right, like sometimes you don't roll great but your opponent doesn't either. Vodka does get the wild trigger on Black Bolt, which is annoying, but he only deals 1 damage with 6 dice into my 1 defense dice. So even if we had a reroll, this is still pretty good. It does mean that he gets to move me backwards again, so now Black Bolt is really out of the action. My 5 threat, even though he didn't get dazed from those attacks, still going to be really inefficient. And Vodka goes for the throw into Sentinel Prime. It is a size 2 terrain piece. I'm kind of happy honestly with this throw because it's gonna give me a bit more power to get some rerolls. I do like that after that he sets up in a way where you can see once again moving backwards and making sure you can set up even more options for his X-Men jump, this time for Pyro. But the one good thing, by being outside of range to X-Men jump Ebonima, he was outside of range to get attacked by Bullseye on Domino. So sometimes you make a little mistake, but then there's a little plus out of it, like in this case. Because had I been able to shoot Domino with Bullseye, it would have been an easy double tap, just 2 guaranteed damage, maybe a bleed, maybe more. Into Domino is massive, she is so tanky. Here I do get the damage, I get the bleed, so good start into Domino. Each life point that I can take off of her is massive. Here, because Prime got some power, some extra power, I can now transfer power from Prime to Miss Marvel, because the plan now is going to be to use Miss Marvel and Crystal at some point to generate some offense. Miss Marvel with Embiggen can get in range and attack Domino. Speaking of which, Domino is going to shoot Sentinel Prime. So Vodka rolls a decent first attack, right, with 5 damage coming in. I will spend 1 for a reroll. I do not spend more because I will fall back on this attack, and that is exactly the kind of payoff that you get with. So we're basically just in range, so by falling back, you will not be able to do his rapid fire attack because I will no longer be in range. That is one thing that I've seen people forget. You do need to take in, when you do rapid fires, if your opponent is not in range, you cannot re-attack, right? Like, so like bodyguards fall back, you can get out of range. There's a few ways to prevent the second attack, which is always useful. That means that Domino now spends her second action at just staying there. I'm guessing it's because she's in a decent spot to threaten a lot of stuff. She's not in range to get attacked by much, outside of like, well, I guess Miss Marvel and Crystal could attack her at some point, but moving forward would have not done much. Moving backwards either. Like, Miss Marvel will have the option to embiggen at some point. Here he's out of range for Black Bolt, so this makes it a bit more awkward for me, because I'd really like, basically I need to start to daze his models that have hammers, but both are extremely tanky, so it's not like it's easy. But I've got some options now into Domino, so Miss Marvel goes in, gets a big embiggen clap into Domino. Domino with cover does still block too, which also prevents crits. Don't expect to deal that much damage, but hey, every damage counts. Spend one on Prime for an extra reroll, because I just want to, like, every point of damage that I can force is pretty massive. So now Domino only has 2 life left. Basically, that's the thing with Domino. She's super tanky, but she only has 5 left. So like, her tankiness really comes through like having insane defense dices. Sacrifice is used, which is nice, because now I can spend power on Miss Marvel to try to really get a lot of damage into Ebonima. Unsacrificed crits do not explode, as you can see, and neither Storm's leadership also isn't active, so it's an opportunity to deal a fair bit of damage. I consider boosting, like adding some extra rerolls, but I'd rather save that power for rerolls like in the future. At this point, like, my main goal is to daze Domino, so like everything into Ebonima doesn't matter as much. One thing to note that is very relevant here, right? I'm gonna pause the video in a sec. One thing to note, as you can see, I have not sent anyone near the center, right? That place is kind of like a dead zone for me. And one of the reasons, which I didn't mention earlier, is Logan. On round 1, Logan went to safety over here, right? Because that would protect him from my Sentinel Prime dragging him. The only thing is, it does mean that now the only thing that Logan can really do is move and attack someone that goes on the center. He doesn't threaten anyone else, and otherwise all he's gonna do is double move, right? Like move once, move twice, maybe go on the center himself to get in the action. But as long as I don't go forward, I am not exposing myself to Logan. Kind of like I have a bit more of my models doing work than is for the early game, which kind of like means that I can get a little bit of an attrition lead potentially. Sadly, with how Sentinel Prime rolled, it didn't go as well as I hoped. But outside of that, Ebonima also rolled pretty poorly for Vodka, so that kind of like helps. I would have liked a little bit less wilds from him, so that Black Bolt would be less out of position than he is, but hey, what can you do? Arrow goes into Bullseye, deals a little bit of damage, but nothing major. I do use my parting shot to get a bit more away. This also puts me in range that now I can use Bullseye to give power to Crystal, Miss Marvel, or Sentinel Prime with my leadership, which is neat because I really want to get Crystal some extra power, because she's gonna have some pretty nasty options this round potentially. I want to keep Crystal for last because she's got some options where she can move, attack, and then use Elemental Onslaught, right? This is what I'm looking at, and I've got at least one Sweet Beam. So here Vodka is considering if he should go with Logan or Storm first. I personally think I would have preferred him, like, if he would have went with Logan first, my life would have been kind of simpler, but not as good. While here, let's see, he sets up Storm so that she can also up next round, and she still scores a back point, leaving Logan as an option that at least if I go on the center, he can beat me up really hard. But that does mean that now because as long as Storm is not activated, even though she's not the most dangerous model, if I send Crystal in, right, like if Crystal goes in, because she moves long, so she can get like somewhere around here and then do the big beam into those two. This is like kind of like what I'm looking at. If I do this and Storm hasn't activated, Storm can counterpunch me. It's not going to be the greatest counterpunch ever, right? Storm doesn't hit crazily hard, but it still is a risk. While if he doesn't activate Storm and sends Logan over here, I might get a triple man beam. So like, this is the only thing, right? If he would have went with Logan, maybe I could have gotten an interesting triple beam instead. Would it be worse than if he got the chance of counterpunching? Because so far, even though what's interesting for me so far is that this game, even though I've got priority, so Vodka has the last activation. So far his last activations have been setting up the following round, but never actually outputting too much damage or too much control. So I've been able to get a lot of free value out of playing first, which is something that when you play second, you want to try to always have a last activation that is really impactful, and so far Vodka's will not have been, so this is like my minor, like the minor edge I'm getting. So as you can see, right, I'm looking, the first thing I'm looking at is there a way that it can be outside of shush range and attacking Domino? The answer is yes, but not in a meaningful way, because I'd rather just put myself in a position where I can beam both. With the Incinerate on a while, I can potentially deal a lot of damage. If I can daze Domino and grab her hammer, then Crystal with 2 hammers is really nasty when she gets to do her beam and extra attacks and all that fun stuff. We start into Ebony Maw, and I roll like a really good attack, dealing a bunch. Vodka also rolled pretty well, right, with 4 blocks, so I only deal 1. But I do get the Incinerate, which is pretty neat. Into Domino, no wild, 3 damage, E blocks 3, so I don't deal anything. I do spend for Elemental Onslaught. I do expect, right, and here this is the nice thing, as I was mentioning, Logan is too far to counterpunch this play, and that is why it's really, really good for me, because it means that next round I can start with the same activation and do the same thing with Crystal. This is something sometimes, right, when it feels like you kind of like steal a lot of tempo from your opponent. It's when you get that like that value where, like, for instance here, right, he's gonna position a bit further away so that I don't get a 3-man beam. But I've got now, I'm really happy now with the game state because of that sequencing with Storm, getting a bit lucky on Black Bolt so that he didn't daze from Ebony Maw was also pretty nice. So now with Crystal, I can do the beam again into Maw and Domino. And now all of the defensive techs for Vodka that are relevant for this play are gone, right? No more shush, no more sacrifice. It's time to bring the hammer in and like destroy his models ideally. So another beam, we go back into Domino first this time. I have only 1 before reroll, and Vodka chooses not to spend for his call, which is an interesting decision. I personally think I would have spent just for the safety, because now after reroll I do deal a damage. I probably should have spent power on Prime for even more, honestly, right? Like add 2 power, I should have spent for even more into Domino. The reason I did it is I only have 2 power on Prime, so I kind of like I felt like I could afford to be greedy. Maybe I should have not been, but you know what? It's like at worst I can do another beam into both, which is my train of thought. If I do daze her on this attack though, which now I will spend power to try to deal the extra damage, and I do. As long as I daze her in just 1 attack plus onslaught, the cool thing is I can pick up the hammer and run away instead of attacking again. Which, honestly, I was fine with the idea of just attacking twice, because if I attack twice, maybe I daze like also Ebony Maw or something and Domino, but you're dazing 1 and running away also feels pretty good. Because now that I have 3 hammers, Vodka is in that stuff spot where even though he is leading by 1 on victory points because he scored the center with Logan, even if he scores the center again with only 1 hammer, the maximum points he can score is 3 from his side of the board. And even if I just secure my back, I will score, which means that I would win this game over a few rounds very easily without really having to engage. So now Vodka is forced to be the aggressor and moving really deep forward. Like, he has to go into my lines and start attacking stuff, and I can play more defensively, which is what I'd rather be doing if I can, because now a lot of my models have not activated yet, so whoever he moves in can then get attacked, and I can keep doing attrition and doing less move actions overall, which is what matters, because see here Pyro has to move to attack Prime. Prime blocks all attack, which is a nice little bonus. Now if Pyro is within 4 of Prime, that means that Prime at worst can restrain Cable and then I can attack Pyro. That is like the baseline play that I can do. But I have other options that seems even more interesting. One thing to note, Vodka did not bring pyrotechnics, but for most of the game, I just thought, in my mind he had it, right? That is something he's done now a few times. I've seen him play Mystique without Deception, Pyro without Pyrotechnics, and people are just so used to playing against those cards that they play as if the opponent had them, even if they don't, which is kind of funny. It kind of like creates that little mental gymnastic that we're not used to. So like because of that, I'm really scared of like at some point Pyro just spreading Incinerate on everyone and then using Pyrotechnics to make me drop all of my hammers. When playing against X-Men and trying to play defensive, one thing to always be careful of, for instance in this case, is like, is Ebonimo now has two ways of jumping more forward with Pyro and Logan, and then he can drop some more damage, right? So because I'm already giving away priority right now, I am considering trying to get into a position to mess up Ebonimo a little bit, either attack him or like throw him away with Miss Marvel. But because of his leadership, it feels less good. But because everything else is kind of far away, and I'm not really too worried, I choose to go with Black Bolt, shake off the Incinerate, and move a little bit further back, right? I shake off the Incinerate part because this way I'm a bit tankier, and it lets me fear a bit less the Pyrotechnics, which doesn't exist, but in my mind right now for the game I haven't realized yet that it's not on the table. The good news for me is even if he really wants to go after Crystal, there's no way he can go after and deal more than like one attack. Like he can move an attack, but he cannot move an attack. But he cannot like X-Men jump and attack twice. I'm too far for this with all of my extract carriers, and if he attacks anyone else than my extract carriers, I'm kind of happy. If I can get one round or two of like scoring 4 victory points, the game can then end in my favor very easily. So Mom moves forward and goes for the Spender into Crystal, which is not something I was planning at all. Pretty annoying because it's a lot of dices with 8. At least I have like a lot of rerolls. So as long as he doesn't spike too much, I can potentially block a bit. So I'm fairly lucky here, even though my own defensive roll was pretty bad with 2 skulls. Vodka's attack was also pretty bad. So, and here we see a defensive use of the leadership. I don't know how I feel about that, because that means that Storm is not going to be able to output as much offense as she could have otherwise. Miss Marvel is within 4 of Pyro, so that means that I could embiggen and double strike Pyro, or I can Morpho Strike punch him. Considering the fact that my extract carriers are safe and now in like a pretty decent position defensively, I really like the idea of just using the Morpho punches. Try to get a wild to push Pyro towards my team, but mostly to get him within 3 so that I can then throw him and kind of like reposition him in a more awkward position. There we push Pyro towards us, but more like to the side, which brings him within 3. Because of Pyrotechnics, I'm pretty scared of just dazing him here without getting to throw him away. So I choose to just throw him away instead of attacking him again. I don't know, like, had I realized that he didn't have Pyrotechnics, I would have played this a bit differently. At that point in time, I haven't realized yet, so I choose not to try to daze him and then just throw him away. One thing I should have really done with that last power is give it to Crystal. Because right now, one problem I have is that Crystal doesn't have enough power for breaks for impact on next round. And that can be very relevant because there's Logan that could throw someone into her, or maybe Bunnyma could throw, or like Storm. Like there's a lot of potentials, and I do have Brace available in my tactic cards, but I cannot pay for it because I have Hammers, which add an extra power to the use of it. And that's a mistake that as I rewatch the game, I'm like, yeah. I remember a little bit later on in the game realizing I should have transferred a power, and that is one of the tricky parts with the Inhumans leadership. Sometimes you have to figure out when to give power to people, and sometimes you have to think not just about the immediate situation, but exactly right, the future. And that's where it gets really hard, and why it's one of the more skill-intensive leaderships out there. Just being able to plan what you need power-wise, not on the current round, but the following round, is not always easy. But it is extremely rewarding. Alright, so Storm attacked Sentinel. Prime shocked him, which is really obnoxious, dealt a bit more damage, so Prime is starting to be really beat up. I choose to go with Bullseye first because I'm like, you know what, I can attack Ma this way. I'm still in the blind that if I can daze and or KO Ma as fast as possible, my life's gonna be easier. I do use the I never miss superpower to delay damage to Ma. I do also get the wild, so he's bleeding, which is really, really nice. The one thing I didn't consider is that now Logan can attack Bullseye for free. Kind of. You can attack Bullseye and use Bullseye as a way of jumping and attacking someone else. Which, as you can see though, if he does that, he's not going to be in range to attack Crystal. And even if he moves to attack Crystal, it seems really tight on if he's in range or not. He chooses to go for the attack into Bullseye, so that's a bit of a misplay. With me sending Bullseye there, I feel kind of like gave him that attack for free, which also lets Logan gain some power. And for me, the main thing that I was thinking about is by leaving Sentinel Prime for last, like I was gonna leave Sentinel Prime for last no matter what, but maybe with Bullseye I should have probably gone for a different plan. Is more what I mean. Because here he's gonna be a little bit short, so you can go into Sentinel Prime, which is what I was hoping for though, which is that if he dazes Sentinel Prime, it sucks a bit for me because I don't get to punish Logan right away and start beating him up, because he does have exceptional healing, so it's a bit tricky to daze him really fast, but he's incinerated, so there's always a chance. Like with Prime I can deal a lot of damage, but if he dazes me I gain prio, and gaining prio does come with his with a few advantages, but Logan rolls like a madman and Prime gets obliterated. So one thing to note, we're not sure exactly when that happened, but Prime was always outside of range of the demons. If you look earlier in the game, in the replay, you'll see the demons doesn't appear on him because he's outside of one. And while placing or at some point something happened and he got within one, but we're gonna replace him in the future. Which is something that happens. That's why it's important to communicate with your opponent, every intention of what you do, because that can have a pretty big impact on the game. Like if you are in range for something and you say you are, or you don't want to be, and you place yourself out and then something gets bumped, you'd be surprised. And I've seen, like, even on TTS models sometimes get bumped a little bit. It happens more with the ones that are not like full 3D models for some reason. I can't explain why though. Now Logan is in my face. He's a pretty big problem, but Sentinel Prime can mess him up really hard. Even with exceptional healing, I have decent chances of dazing him. If I can deal 5 or 6 damage on the first shot, I can force exceptional healing and then daze him on the second one. The other thing is, if I go with the Spender, I can shock him, bleed him, but mostly shock him. And if I can shock him, then his impact is going to be lessened for his following activation. So doing with Prime just makes a lot of sense, and the plan is to try to daze Logan. With 10 power, I have a decent chance, as the 8 dice attack into 3 defense with potentially 3 rerolls is a lot of incoming damage. So I spent for 3 rerolls. Vodka only blocked 1. My initial roll isn't great, but after rerolls we convert this into 6 damage, blocking 1, so 5, which is the perfect number. This forces Vodka to either exceptional healing or accept that Logan is very likely dazing. This is an interesting decision that I know Vodka and I, he chose not to do it, and he was like, after the game we'll talk about it, and we did, and I agree with him, because if he does it, I would still have 5 power on Prime. Using my leadership, I can go back up to 6, and with 6 power it's either another builder with another 8 dice with 3 reroll builder, gives me a 50, if I remember correctly, it's 52% chance of dazing him still. And if I go for a Spender, which I would have done because of the wild shock potential, right? If I go for the Spender and do 9 dice into 3 with 2 rerolls, I have a 54 point something % chance of dazing him. Don't remember the exact number, but it's around that. And if I do daze him, which is more likely than not, but not by a lot, but still by a decent, a little bit, then it's brutal, because he's burned exceptional healing and he's still dazed. If he survives and I shock him, he might still do a lot of work and mess up a lot of my models, but that's a risk that, it's not necessarily game winning if it happens, and maybe whiffs, right? So if it's guaranteed that he murders everything, especially with a shock, limits a little bit his output, he has a bit less power to do everything, so it's not guaranteed it happens. So I personally agree with Vodka on that decision. I know that Barncat and Blair, when they were looking at the game, were both on the other and commentating were both on the other side and thought that you definitely should have went for the exceptional. I'm curious to hear what you think about it in the comments, so feel free to leave comments about that instance and how you feel, what you would have done. Alright, but another side effect of this is it's very likely that Vodka is gonna have Prio next round. And he still has exceptional healing for Logan. And Logan is still in a good position to do work next round, based on the current situation, so it's not like, that's the thing, right, with exceptional healing. Personally, I try, like, unless the play is winning me the game, I try to save it for when I would get KO'd, basically. Because you already have a rubber band with getting dazed, so I'm fine with just burning that one first. But it's a really close call. And I can understand, like, if you'd rather gamble it, it's understandable. Here we see Ma move in position, and this is where, right, the old, here I remove the top down because I actually don't, I think I just prefer playing without it. And here now, Prime is in range for the portals, which I think I mentioned a bit earlier. But yeah, he wasn't initially, so model was like, but it was like, he was barely out, so like he probably got bumped by when something was measured. Sometimes you'll see the models move a little bit when a measuring tool or something get on top of them or something. So like over here, we see Prime moving a little bit. Probably something like that happened, hard to say. And here I really feel dumb for not transferring a power to Crystal. I really feel dumb because I eat another terrain into my face. Alright, Mom moves, uses the X-Men jump to position, and dazes Crystal. I really should have used the leadership last round to give her a power. Not last round, but the round, well, even last round, right? Like, I had 2 windows. I could have given her a power to avoid this. So yeah, that's like probably my biggest misplay of the game, I think. But it could be, like, somebody could debate otherwise, but I really feel dumb for not giving her an extra power. The good news is Ma, because of the bleed and everything, only has 1 life left, so it's a really easy job for Bullseye to daze him back. Having 2 hammers on the incinerated Bullseye doesn't feel as good as having 2 hammers on a Crystal. Crystal outputs way more offense. She was also LT, so even if she, like, now I'm just exposing Bullseye to exploding even more. So with Bullseye, the cool thing is with hit and run, I can shoot him with hit and run, so I get to place the hammers a little bit more further back, like towards my team, grab them, and run away again. So kind of like back to square one, where Bullseye is kind of like in a safe spot. I'm still controlling that those hammers. One thing to note, which you can see, the score is 10-9 because last round, by dazing Sentinel Prime with Logan, Vodka managed to keep the score even at 3-3, which means that he still has that 1 victory point lead, which this round I expect to score more than him, but still is a pretty relevant detail overall. Black Belt Domino gets in range to beat up Sentinel Prime, so she moves and she's gonna shoot him, which is gonna hurt. Like there's no way around it. It's always painful. So I spend for some rerolls. Vodka has 3 successes. I block only 1, so I take 2. With Rapid Fire for 3 more. This time I've spent again for some rerolls, just trying, like, Prime is pretty beat up. The longer I can keep him on the table, the better stuff is going to be for me. But it's starting to look pretty grim, right? Only 2 life left on Prime. That's not great. The good news I've got is I've got a window to try to KO Domino now. Over like a few activations, because I've got Miss Marvel that can get some hits in, like at least 1 hit into her. Potentially Black Bolt that can do it also. One advantage with getting Crystal Days is that once again, I'm probably gonna be able to keep priority because I've dazed Logan before he activates, and he dazed Crystal. So we're at 1-1 for models before being activated that got dazed. So I get 2 damage into Domino with Miss Marvel, which is great. The trade-off is Vodka is looking at going after Bullseye. Bullseye is incinerated. He's got 4 lives, so he doesn't need much. So here, right, we just reposition Sentinel Prime so that he's no longer within 1 of the objective, because he wasn't supposed to be. And you can go back and watch when I do the fallback, but he wasn't in range. You don't see the you don't see the demons appearing on top of his head. at the beginning. And then once he got dazed, it showed up, so not sure what happened. But at some point he got bumped a little bit. But here, interestingly enough, Vodka is also thinking about pyrotechnics. So the mind games have backfired. He also thinks he has it in his cards. He's been measuring, trying to find ways to get pyro within 3 of bullseye, which is not gonna do much, but yeah, that's a little bit awkward. But I do still like the decision with Storm to double move and throw bullseye, because that way you can get bullseye into a more dangerous position for next round. And he's incinerated, so next round he can easily daze him, or KO him, sorry, because he's injured. Or you can still try to go with Pyro after him for that reason. I do move Black Bolt forward here. Still in that mindset, if I can KO someone this round, I'm in a much better position, attrition-wise. So we move Black Bolt forward, sensing blood, and we go after Domino. With a 8 dice energy attack with Pierce, so even though Domino is fairly tanky, that way, the way I see it, with that attack, I have pretty good chances of, like, if I don't KO her, I'm gonna beat her up pretty hard and let her, and like set myself up for next round to KO her. Also have like some non-zero chances of KOing her because she's only got 3 life left, so if she rolls poorly, which she doesn't, I do spend 2 on Prime, not 3 on Prime, and I would have had the Inhuman reroll, but I rolled too many skulls, sadly. Like a 70% chance of killing Domino here, which is pretty good, but it just shows how tanky Domino is, that even with 8 dice coming our way with Pierce and like 4 rerolls, she still has like pretty decent chances of not dying when she has 3 life left. She's so absurdly tanky, and there's still like pretty good odds of her like tanking pretty well. So here I'm realizing that pyrotechnics is not an option. Vodka does realize that even though it would be nice to KO Bullseye, or it would be even better if he could KO Sentinel Prime and or daze Black Bolt, right? That beam, he goes for the beam onto both of them instead with Pyro, which is more options to deal a lot of damage. I spend some power for some rerolls on Prime because I'm about to get KO'd. After rerolls, I take 1, staying alive on 1. He gets a wild toss, so that means that Black Bolt is incinerated. At that point, I choose to not even boost my defense with Black Bolt, figuring out that way I'm gonna have more power for next round. Then I'm gonna be in a better position to KO some of his models and get the game back in a spot where I can do what I want. So here the awkwardness is with only 1 life left on Sentinel Prime. If I roll a skull, he KOs in the power phase, which I do, sadly. So Prime is gone before I get to activate him this round, which is pretty rough, because even though it didn't KO him last activation, it means he still KOs him. And now it's gonna be really tricky for me. The good news is Pyro only has 1 life left. Domino is almost dead. Pyro is 1 life on its ulti side, but at that point in the game, with the victory points being 13-12, there's a chance that the game ends on this round. Every model you can daze and or KO before they activate is pretty massive for setting yourself up for a victory. So we pop Inhuman Royal Family on everyone that is an Inhuman, so that I get a reroll either on defense or on offense, depending on what happens. And here I have to figure out what my first activation is going to be, because there's a lot of tricky stuff. And one thing I just measured, right, you might have seen it, if not just rewind a little bit, but I put a medium movement tool in between Pyro, and seeing that it is in range, that influences my decision. It means that if I daze Pyro with Bullseye, I can pick up the hammer after without moving. It basically comes down to roughly the same distance. So that's a neat little trick to know if you're going to be in range or not. So it's a little bit less than a range 3, right? Everybody know, I think most people know that. A range, if you're at max 3 from someone you're not going to reach, you have to be a little bit inside. That's basically what a medium movement tool is. Just wanted to take a little moment to put an emphasis on it. Right in here, I also look at the range 2 just to be certain. So I go with Bullseye into Pyro. Ideally, I daze him without, but if I don't, it's also okay. But I'd rather daze him without spending. I spend 1 to pick up the hammer. I use my leadership to give him an extra power so I can do a hit and run shot, because it's pretty free. And now I consider who I go after, right? Logan or Storm. Going after Storm makes more sense because beating up Logan a little bit will probably not matter much, as he's probably just gonna exceptional healing, or healing factor the damage, so it doesn't feel great. With 7 dices, I figure I have a small chance of like one-shotting Storm if I'm lucky. I do not, but I do get a bit of damage into her, and every damage matters. So now I've retreated to a relatively safe spot. Like, the good news is he's not going to be able to go after Bullseye, KO him, and easily grab the hammers after. This is the main thing I'm looking at, and I want to make sure that if he goes after him, I can retaliate after. He goes with Logan because Logan can pick up a hammer pretty much for free. And then he can position himself to attack Bullseye after. Goes for what I do isn't very nice, so that ideally I think he doesn't want to one-shot me and just like deal a bunch of damage and throw me. Unfortunately for him, Logan is pretty angry and just like completely destroys Bullseye. His place is also after the attack is resolved, so he will not be able to place with Logan off of Bullseye, grab the hammers, which is really relevant for me. So this is a tricky spot for Vodka because he has to figure out a way to place the hammers that I will not be able to just grab them all and run and like position myself in an awkward spot after with say Crystal. The good news for him is that because he dealt 2 damage to Crystal, I don't feel as comfortable just running into the corner and grabbing all the hammers, or like some hammers, because I expect I don't necessarily live after, because there's still Ebonima and Storm that can run after me. So after a little bit of time thinking about it, Vodka ends up with kind of like by spreading them out in such a way that I cannot grab all of them, so that I would be able to grab 2 of them max. The other hammer is on Logan, who is incinerated. Does have access to exceptional healing, but if there's one model that can power through exceptional healing and potentially KO Logan, it's Crystal. Crystal with her AoE 1 attack will be able to hit Logan because he plays within one of her, and no one else because no one else is within range. But that's a 5 dice attack, which against 3 defense with a reroll and a token to potentially reroll any number of dice can deal a good chunk of damage. I think I can get 2 decent chunks in, and a big shot I can potentially KO him later on. I do before that want to daze a lot of his models, right, like I explained at the beginning of the round, so I figure if I can daze Storm right now and prevent her from activating, and maybe even KO Domino with Black Bolt, because now I've got pretty good odds of KOing her. She's incinerated. Like, if I can do this round, I'm in a really good spot. So I do end up needing the token from Inhuman Royal Family, but I do daze Storm. It was really likely. 7 dice with reroll any pierce against 3 defense is pretty good. Into Domino, I do not roll quite as well. I get 3 with Pierce, but Domino's blocking 2, so she takes only 1. Oh, she blocks 3. Yeah, she blocks 3, sorry. She blocks 3 because of cover. So she survives, which is really unfortunate, because that means that she's gonna get a chance to activate. But at least I take Storm, right? And as I was mentioning, every activation you can deny is massive, which is why now Domino is looking at going after Crystal, because Crystal is injured. She's got some damage on already. She's the one that's the more likely. She's in a really good spot to beat up like Logan and stuff. And she survived on 1, which is really unfortunate. Like, MCP dices are pretty wild, so you can never plan anything, but if you ever, like, whenever you look at the cerebral odds, that the fact that she's still alive after tanking the 2 shots from Black Bolt is pretty annoying. But hey, I got good breaks on other things, and that's how it is. You have to roll with the punches, try to make the most out of it. So Domino moves forward, goes onto the objective, make my life a little bit more awkward with Miss Marvel, and she shoots into Crystal. She gets 3 successes, Crystal blocks 2, and the big part is no rapid fire. So that means that Crystal will live, and is now, even though she did get to attack, she dealt only 1 damage, so yeah, there's a That's like a little bit of a, like, you know what, I'll take it. It's a little bit of a freebie. Crystal is almost gone. I really have to go with her before anything else happens. I'd really like to go with Miss Marvel, like, but I figured I should go with Crystal. It's just the easier play. And then if Vodka dazes Miss Marvel with Ebonima, then I keep Prio for next round, which would be massive. But yeah, I'm taking my time to think about it because it's pretty tricky, right? I have the Crystal play that I've mentioned earlier, or I can like Earthshaker into Logan a bunch of times and try to take him out, which is what we're gonna go for. Logan blocks 0 on his 3 defense dice because he's incinerated, so I end up spending the token right away. I get 4 successes, so this is an easy exceptional E-Link, as if he takes it then he's almost guaranteed to die. So exceptional E-Link takes only 1. I use Elemental Onslaught, going for one of the 4 dice attacks. I do the one that slows if I remember correctly. Doesn't super matter because the goal is to KO him, but I cannot push him because he's too big. I don't want to push him anyways. He's already incinerated, so the rest doesn't matter too much. So I do deal a few more damage into Logan, so now he's got 3 damage on him. I've got 1 action left to attack him, which I will use to Earthshaker him. With the same logic, right? If I can KO him right away, my life is much easier. I do not, sadly. He lives on 1. It's a bit unfortunate, but I still have Miss Marvel to finish the job if I need to, which I mean, that's the plan basically now. If possible, KO Domino and Logan for next, so that next round Vodka is in a tough spot with not that many models left. My team is in a, I guess, L tier position. Not by much, but it's mostly because I've got Black Bolt who's full life, and Black Bolt can take out models next round again, hopefully. He's gonna have the power for it, so you could look at taking out someone. Miss Marvel is gonna keep slaughtering models left and right because that's what she does. She's so good. Honestly, if you play an affiliation where she is affiliated and don't play her, I think you're making a mistake. So X-Men drop from Vodka, and now the tough decisions. But I think Vodka identifies a really good line overall, which is now he could try to attack Miss Marvel twice. If he dazes her, he would score 2 victory points, and I would score none, putting the game at 14-13, but I would have priority next round, which would be pretty wild. But he would have a billion models alive. That would be pretty interesting, but it can also fail, right? It's not like 6 dice versus 2 twice. I've got a reroll, including a reroll any, so I've got some decent chances of surviving. Then I'd have Prio, my 3 models would still be alive. I'd probably be able to do some really dumb stuff with Crystal, honestly, if that were the case. Like KOing Logan, grabbing the hammer, doing some nonsense with beams, with a beam, and then an extra attack with Elemental Onslaught or something. Like, there'd probably be some pretty crazy Crystal stuff coming in, which I'm not sure he'd necessarily want to deal with. I do like that he goes for both hammers here, as he's gonna have Prio next round, so. And hammers are, and he positions in a way that he can go grab the other one after, which is really annoying for me and really good for him. Okay, it would have been interesting if he went for the days on Miss Marvel. I don't know what that would have done necessarily, but it would have been an interesting game for sure on the following round. Would have created some weird decisions for me. Like, my target priority with Crystal would have been pretty wild, but I think I would have tried to KO like Logan and Domino or something, and maybe beam other people and just go out in a blaze of glory. So yeah, sadly misposition a little bit Miss Marvel, so, but I do one-shot Logan, which was very likely with M-Big and Miss Marvel. Grabbing the hammer with Miss Marvel is pretty sweet overall. And then we go into Domino, who blocks like a fair bit, blocking 3 on 2 dices, which is the maximum she could have done, considering our roll. But with the hammer and the token and like the billion rerolls I had, I do force that damage through, pushing the game at 15-14 in my favor on round 6. So here, everything is in a deadly spot, which is really interesting to see. This is a crazy void state, really tricky what to prioritize as each player. I do think that Vodka's priority is just getting rid of Crystal and securing the last hammer with Ebonima, which makes a lot of sense, honestly. It's a fairly simple plan to execute, and it's very likely of working. It's also going to make me burn Brace, and I mean, I have a chance of living, but it's not a good one. And here it checks to make sure that I cannot Master Punch him. I guess the thing with Master Punch is if I manage to deal damage, I could throw him towards like Miss Marvel or something. Honestly, I would try probably more for like a builder, generally speaking, but pretty much sudden death. This round, like it's like there's ways that we force a tie for an extra round, which we're gonna go into after, but it's a very tricky situation. Ma goes into Crystal with the 8 dice gainer, getting 4 successes. I do get a crit, so if I can block 3, I live. I only block, well, I do block 2, which is good but not enough, and Crystal goes down, which is what I was expecting, honest. But if she had lived, this would have been completely crazy. Like if Crystal had lived, the game was kind of over right there for Vodka. Here we're still in like a really tricky game, so I'm gonna pause and we're gonna check a few things. Here I've got some interesting decisions with Miss Marvel, with who to activate. I'm 99% sure I need to activate Miss Marvel first, right? Because with Miss Marvel, the advantage is she's more reliable at KOing like Storm, for instance. I think because it's going to be a physical attack, twice 6 dice, and then if I can KO Storm, I'm in a decent position for winning. The other thing is Miss Marvel can KO someone and still be on the objective after. Because right now, victory points wise, this is the 6th round. We're at 15-14. Vodka is scoring 3 with hammers. And unless I go all in and try to KO Ebony Maw, I am not stopping him from scoring 3. So he's going to 17. Right now I am also going to 17 with Miss Marvel, which is a draw. Well, a draw. We're forcing another round and going into overtime. But if he's got 2 models left, Storm has a throw, which means that she can displace some of my models off of objectives. So if I activate someone and don't go after Storm and KO her, I lose, because whoever I go with then cannot go into an objective or gets moved off of one. The other thing is Black Bolt is not within 2 of either of the models, so it makes it pretty awkward to go after either, to try to daze them. It's a bit less reliable compared to Miss Marvel, and I kind of need the option of Black Bolt moving onto an objective after to give me more ways of potentially winning. Both of his models are in range to attack Miss Marvel at the moment, so this is also pretty awkward. I really need to figure out how to have a winning line here, because it's really tricky. And it's basically gonna come down to what I've been explaining, that I have to go with Miss Marvel. I'm looking for Embiggen. I only have 2 power, but I have the broken leadership, so I can transfer a power and everything's good after. So we go for the play, take a little bit of time to think about it. This is really this has been an insane game. It's been extremely complicated and with a lot of tough decisions. Some small misplays from both, but overall I think a game that was well played. Make a small mistake. I should have moved Miss Marvel a little bit less forward than this. I didn't need to be that forward to be in range to attack Storm. So we go into Storm. Storm is blocking 2 on the first shot, but we get a decent shot in with Miss Marvel, right? After all the rerolls and everything, we get 5 successes, dealing 3 damage. Now we go in for the second shot. I need to deal 2 to get her. Vodka gets a good defense roll, blocking 3, so I need to deal 2. I do get it with 5 successes, and I KO her, and now I have to. First of all, I realize I'm over the base, so I just move a little bit backwards, but I messed it up. I really could have been way less forward than this, because now I cannot get onto the objective and outside of range 4 Spiral, which would have been really good. Well, maybe I can. I'm gonna spend quite a lot of time trying to figure out if I can. But I could have been way less forward with Miss Marvel and still been in range to attack Storm. And I would have had the breathing room, because here it's extremely tight. If you look, you can just keep looking at it, and I'm trying to find a way, but yeah. So that was a pretty position from my part that could have easily cost me the game. And I'm kind of lucky that it didn't, because it really could have. And it was totally easy to control. I just didn't take the time to pre-measure the range 3 from Storm. I only measured it off of Pyro. I didn't think about the fact that I wanted to be outside of 4 of Pyro after. It was a pretty stressful situation in a really intense game, but still very sloppy on my part, and it really could have cost me the game. Here I tried to position with the short tool of Black Bolt to get roughly an idea of if I can get outside of range, and the answer seems to be maybe with like perfect positioning, but it's unlikely because the range 1 is a bit more than where the short ends, and like, but so is the range 4. Like everything just seems to be like almost impossible to get out of, but like at some point I'm, you know what, I'm gonna try, and worst comes to worst, I'm still in range. Good news is with 3 defense dice, even while incinerated against energy attacks, Miss Marvel has like better odds than most of surviving the retaliation, which is going to be 2 7 dice energy attacks from Pyro, but it doesn't have any rerolls. I have a reroll on defense, so it's hard to say because it's 2 attacks, right? But my odds of surviving are probably, right, I'm still barely in, right, as you can see, but odds of surviving are like around 50 something %, and that's like really the interesting decision. It's been mentioned by someone in the chat during the game that instead of doing this, Pyro could have went for a Firewall and Black Bolt and double move to the back objective, score an extra point, which would have forced me to move Black Bolt onto this middle objective to even it out in score, and then the following round I would have probably been able to KO Pyro with Black Bolt, and then it becomes really iffy because it's gonna be more obvious after. And because here, like the game's gonna be over because Pyro, right? It's over. Pyro didn't KO Daze Miss Marvel, and now Black Bolt can easily get onto the objective. And here we're talking about the alternative, right? So we're gonna look at it a little bit. So yeah, Miss Marvel managed to live. She had decent odds, and now Black Bolt can just move on to that center objective, right? And I score 1, 2, 3, going to 18 to Vodka's 17. So a really tight finish to a tight game. So the other play that was mentioned is if Pyro double moves, and I'm gonna use different colors. So if Pyro goes over here and incinerates Black Bolt, so Black Bolt is forced to move twice to go over here. This is neat. It forces a tie for the round, but on the following round is where it gets tricky because I've got Black Bolt who's like, he would like, Vodka would have priority, but it might not be obvious with this angle, but this over here, this isn't in range for a move, a medium move plus to get an attack in. And because it's not in range, that means that Vodka cannot go move under Miss Marvel and try to win that way. Because if he could, honestly, with a 11 dice Mystic attack into 2 Mystic defense, he would have better odds that way of dazing her than he did with Pyro. But this isn't in range, right? So this is not an option. So because this isn't an option, if Pyro is now standing over here and Black Bolt is standing over there, what does he do as his first activation next round? Goes with Pyro and attack Black Bolt? That's not, like, I mean, it's a thing. Probably what he has to do, right? And then, like, say he does that and he attacks. Boom, into over here. Should not be dazing, should not be KOing Black Bolt more often than not because Black Bolt is extremely tanky. And then Black Bolt retaliates, depending on the amount of damage I've taken, it's going to be either 1 or 2 builders with boosted attacks, or maybe even a Whisper, maybe a Master Punch, if I'm really motivated. Like, there's a lot of stuff I can do, depending on how much power I've got at that moment. One thing I would not dislike is potentially a Master Punch, even if I have to move, potentially a Master Punch, because then I could throw him towards more towards like Miss Marvel and stuff, and then Miss Marvel would be able to move and begin and also strike Pyro, so that I could get 2 hits into Pyro this round with like good quality attacks and potentially KO him. And then once I KO him, we get into that weird situation where I would be scoring 3 victory points and him 3, and no one has any way of moving forward without losing, or almost guaranteed of losing, because what I would do after, depending on what the life on Black Bolt looks like, I would probably have Black Bolt trying to bait an attack from Ebony Maw or Miss Marvel, whatever, but I would probably just just move like Miss Marvel to safety over here, and then at some point like have Black Bolt more like working here. Then basically if Ma ever tries to get onto that point, I can throw him off with Miss Marvel as a light activation, and then like, I don't know, or like a Master Punch, and then get into those weird situations. But like, it would have been really weird, honestly. That's not what Vodka went for. It would have been like that weird draw where somebody would have been forced of making a not optimal play to try to break it, because if we just draw for an infinite amount of time, we would like just conclude the game as a draw. But then with a draw, neither of us makes it into the cut, because draws count as losses. So with a 4-1-1 score, neither one of us would move forward. So I think going for the pyro play and trying to win instead of maybe creating that really weird situation is better. So yeah. As you can see here, we just finished the game with the 18-17 score, which is pretty crazy. Really intense game. So that's going to be it for this one. Thanks for watching. This was a really good game. I hope you guys will have enjoyed it.